Hey everyone, it's Janice from the Divorcing Religion podcast. I'm excited to tell you that my book is now for sale. It's called Divorcing Religion, a memoir and survival handbook, and I'll make sure you have a link in the notes for that. And also I want to encourage you to like, subscribe, and become a member of my YouTube channel. Take care. Hey everyone, welcome to the Divorcing Religion podcast. I'm your host, Janice Selby. I'm a registered professional counselor and a religious trauma recovery coach. Cynane Shay is a nuclear engineer living in South Carolina. Her childhood in white Christian nationalism normalized conspiracy theories like Obama Birtherism and the biblical apocalypse. But 2020 with COVID and Qanon finally made her realize something was deeply wrong. Now Cynane is writing a book, Taking Off the Tinfoil Hat, How Lizard People and Space Lasers Dismantled My Christian Worldview, to process the deconstruction of her fundamentalist evangelical faith and her propagandistic patriotism. Losing loved ones to the pandemic was a tragedy, but losing loved ones to the rabbit hole was its own tragedy that left too many with unresolved trauma and unanswered questions. So from flat Earth to the IBLP cult to Jewish space lasers, Cynane pulled the thread, cracked her faith, and found the inseparable link between cults, conspiracy theories, and American white Christian nationalism. Wow, Cynane, you've had quite a journey. Welcome to the Divorcing Religion podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I am super excited to connect and be able to put this together.
Yeah, you have just had so many interesting elements to your life, and I feel like a lot of our listeners and viewers for this show will be able to relate on different levels. So please talk to us a little bit about growing up in the family that you grew up in the environment that you grew up in, and then kind of how you ended up moving out of that.
So my name is Cynane, and I was raised in what I kind of consider to be just quintessential white Christian nationalism. Basically just like a basic bitch evangelical Christianity. And a lot of what I grew up in, I think, is stuff that was normalized and just kind of a snapshot of broader American culture trends. Like, I really don't think that my background is exceptional, which is the most disturbing part of this, because it should not have been normalized the way that it was. But my religious background is that I was raised in, we attended a non-denominational Calvary Chapel Church for Sundays. This was our main church, which is a denomination that was started in Southern California. It has over 1,800 congregations worldwide now. Essentially Southern Baptist theology, but with a rock band and board shorts. So they don't allow women to be leaders in the church. They believe that homosexuality is a sin. But they have this veneer of, oh, we're cool, we're hip, we're young, we're accepting, but they're not. So that was our main church, and we would go to church every Sunday. We weren't one of those families that went to church 4 times a week or anything, but we went on Sundays. And then I also attended a private Christian school for kindergarten to 8th grade. And that was based out of a different non-denominational evangelical church that was very just a white Christian nationalist indoctrination camp. The mascot for the school was the Patriots, as in 1776 Revolutionary War Patriots. We had an annual Plymouth Day where you would have to dress up either as a pilgrim or as a very racist rendition of Native Americans. We took a trip to Boston so that we could further study and worship the Founding Fathers. The curriculum was centered around this is a Christian nation and proving that to us. And I don't remember a lot of the specifics, but I have a couple friends that I went to school there with, and confirmed that they were using a Becca curriculum and all of these like Christian school curriculum that are popular in both homeschooling and private Christian schools, that are factually incorrect, historically incorrect, and quite dangerous. But the third kind of circle of influence that I grew up under was an actual Southern Baptist church. I went there for youth groups. My best friend, who we'll call Kathy, she and her family went there, as well as some of my older relatives. So I would attend on like either Wednesday or Thursday nights, like all through middle and high school. And in the summers, I would go to, summer camps, but they were always church summer camps, Bible summer camps, vacation Bible school, some volunteer programs, but they were like based in the church, based in evangelizing. It was a very, very small town. So the kids who were going to the school were also going to the Calvary Chapel. Some of them were also going to the Southern Baptist Church. So it was very insular. It was very controlled. My parents did not let us make friends who were outside of the bubble. Everybody had to be a Christian. Everybody was a Republican. I didn't know anybody who was a Democrat, a Democrat, a Democrat, that you could not be a Christian and be a Democrat. And so there was a lot of, a lot of stuff went over my head because I was a child at the time, but the Bill Clinton era and like into like the Bush years, all of the right-wing conspiracy theories of those times. And then the other kind of like really just awful aspect of my community and my childhood was that many of the families that I grew up around were pretty involved in the Institute and Basic Life Principles cult. IBLP was a cult that was run by Reverend Bill Gothard, who, long story short, we found out had been molesting, sexually harassing, sexually assaulting a bunch of young girls. But his whole shtick was that you shouldn't use birth control. It's against God's will. You should have as many children as God will bless you with. It was hyper patriarchal. So women were very, very controlled, not encouraged for higher education, not encouraged to work outside the home. The dress code was, 2 finger widths below the collarbone. You can't show your shoulders. Have to wear floor length skirts. Like sometimes you weren't even allowed to wear pants. And I was in a really weird position because my family was not a part of this, but everybody that I knew was. So a lot of the girls that I grew up with were going to IBLP summer camps in the summer. I was invited to some of those. And, the only reason I didn't go is because like the dress code was floor length skirts. And I just really hated being told what to wear. And also I'm from Florida, so I assume that it's 110 degrees everywhere all the time. Realistically, the camps were probably in like Michigan or something where the summer isn't hot, but I don't know what that's like. So there was just this hyper purity culture, like regular purity culture, but then like also this like really intense version of purity culture. My sexual education included the only part of my sexual education was that my mom like basically locked me in a room and made me listen to a James Dobson audio tape for like 8 hours. I think she broke it up over 2 or 3 days. But the core message of it was basically just that like your spirituality is tied to your sexuality. And if you commit a sexual sin, then you are permanently damaging your soul. And they left the definition of sexual sin so vague so that you are living in just like constant terror of this, like prolonged eye contact becomes like a sexual sin. And then you're like, oh, like, have I cheated on my husband by, saying good morning to this boy that I think is cute at youth group. And there was also, my mom in particular was obsessed with the rapture, was convinced that because Israel became a state in 1948, her generation was the generation that was going to see the rapture. So I needed to be ready at any moment to be sucked up into the sky, so that, every time you lose your mom in the grocery store, you're convinced that you've been left behind. So there's a lot of rapture anxiety. The hyper fundy moms who were sending their daughters to IBLP summer camps were the ones who were running our local summer camps, our Bible sermons, our like girls groups who were volunteering at the school that I went to. They were the ones teaching us to try to speak in tongues as like an 11-year-old. And then, if you can't speak in tongues, then the Holy Spirit's not, with you. And then you have salvation anxiety. And it was just a lot of stress. And then, my sort of saving grace, part of my saving grace was the fact that my mom, I like to call her an accidental feminist. She was a firefighter in a time when women were not firefighters. And, she was hyper independent and very strong-willed, but at the same time, was hyper fundamentalist. So she had lived on her own. She moved out when she was 17. She'd been proposed to like half a dozen times. She'd had abusive relationships. She'd watched her friends have abusive relationships that ended worse than hers did. And so she always told me, a man can always leave you. You need to get an education. You need to be able to support yourself. Even if you've been married for 15 years and you have 3 kids, a man can always leave you. So you just need to have something to fall back on for yourself. And I was just naturally the kid who was good at school. So I was just like, well, yeah, okay, I'll just be good at school. And I didn't realize until recently, like how different of a message I was getting at home than what my friends were getting at home. My friend, I got to go to a real college. I went to the University of Florida. I did nuclear engineering, which is a STEM degree. And while I was in college, my best friend, Kathy, she was teaching English in Taiwan through an IBLP program. And her, I remember seeing like Bill Gothard VHS tapes in her house and stuff. Like her family was a lot more involved in that. But I saw her in 2020, just as the pandemic was starting to happen. And she said something to the effect of like, some girl that we knew had gotten married and divorced within like 2 years to some like Bible college husband. And she was like, I'm starting to think that maybe like marriage isn't that easy. And I guffawed because
you don't say.
I was like, because my mom had always told me that like marriage is work and like marriage is a decision and like all this stuff. And I was just like, well, yeah. And it wasn't until then that I was like, oh my God, this is my best friend. Like we have the same birthday, like we're the same age, like we grew up together. And I was like, she has been told basically that your one true like goal in life is to, get married, find God's going to magically send you a magical mail order Christian husband. And then that's how you're going to fulfill your purpose in life. And that if you are righteous, you will basically prosperity gospel. Like if you are righteous, you will have a good husband and you will live a perfect life and you will be, financially stable and emotionally stable and you'll have good God-fearing children and like the world will be perfect. And as we're getting older, we were seeing the reality of that. And I had always at least had a glimpse of that. And I realized that maybe they did not. So I went to college, and I remained indoctrinated the entire way through. You hear these these stories of people who were like, oh, like my horizons broadened. I met people from different walks of life. I started questioning how I was raised. Not me.
My goodness.
I lived with a girl from my hometown. We went to the same private Christian school together. Our friend group for the first 2 years of undergrad were a more Pentecostal, charismatic church. And I didn't really make like college friends until probably junior, senior year because my program got like a lot more demanding. And so I finally started hanging out with like the nuclear engineers who were not all Christians. But, part of this is just like my own quirk and personality and being a little bit socially awkward and like, you know, I didn't like super branch out. But there's also, I can definitely recognize an element of this of I was raised in just intense fear. You cannot be friends with people who are not Christians. When I went to high school, I left the private Christian school. I was specifically warned, they're going to try to teach you evolution. You need to just regurgitate whatever they tell you to get an A on the test, but you need to like guard yourself and don't let yourself be fooled by the devil. And so I went to college and it was kind of the same thing. Like you're going to meet people who are going to try to lead you astray. And it was a little bit terrifying. And you know, but the second 2 years of college, I was like, oh, they're not demons. Like these are fun people. Like I like these people. So like that helped a little bit. There were like little moments that I recognized, but.
And I'm just going to ask Cynane, did any of then the more regular nuclear engineer type folks in the last couple of years you were there, did they know and understand that you were a Christian and still somewhat entrenched in that mindset? Like, did any of them ever try and question you, or were you just totally accepted and religion was never really discussed?
So I wasn't like the only Christian. We live in a Christian hegemony. So most people that you meet are Christian, not because it's like a really conscious decision, but it's just because it's just like how you're raised and what you do. And, you know, so they knew that I was a Christian. But I don't think that they really knew what that meant a lot of times if they weren't like in the same milieu.
Yeah.
I have this one friend who in recent years, since I have deconstructed, I have been talking to her about this more. And she was like, oh, I had no idea. And like, she's fascinated. And she asks me questions about, you know, what it means to be like a fundamentalist Christian. And, you know, now that has severe political implications. So like she knew in college, but she didn't know. And there was one guy who knew that I was like pretty fundy. And I just remember he asked me, he was like, okay, well, or maybe I asked him like, what do you think happens when you die, or vice versa? And he was just like, the same thing that happens before you're born. And I didn't have an answer for that. I didn't have like a scripted thought terminating mantra to spit out for that. And it stuck with me to this day. But I glossed over it. I was like, I don't need to know. I don't need to have the answer for everything. I know that I'm right. Yeah. But, and then growing up, and this is like an important aspect, is the conspiracy theories, because my family was a little bit more white nationalist than white Christian nationalist. Like my friends were super fundy IBLP types. My family was definitely evangelical. Very important that they put us in that private Christian school and that we were raised to be like good Christians. But they were a little bit more involved in like the Republican conspiracy theories, and they were very obsessed with Obama Birtherism. And at the time, I was still probably too young. I didn't really pay attention to current events. And I don't know that I would have said that that was a conspiracy theory or have recognized it for that.
Can you explain it a bit for Canadians and non-US citizens, what Obama birtherism is?
I'm sorry. Yeah, so when Obama ran the first time, I think I was like in high school. I was not old enough to vote, but Donald Trump was still around even then, obviously not as big and significant as he is now, but he was a large proponent. He wasn't the only person, but he was a large proponent for this Obama birtherism conspiracy theory, which was that Obama was not actually born in the United States. He was like supposedly born in Kenya. And so there were all of these like demands that like Obama produce his birth certificate to prove, because you have to be a United States citizen to be eligible to be the president. And even after he did produce his birth certificate, they were like, that's not good enough. It's fake. Or they just always move the goalpost. So my family was like also convinced that Obama was not born in the United States. Didn't even matter if he was born in the United States or not, because he was a secret Muslim and that he was trying to infiltrate the highest levels of United States government in order to basically like corrupt the nation and turn us away from the good Christian moral values, and like, extremely racist. This is all rooted explicitly in racism, because he was a Black man, and he had a scary last name for racists.
Right.
And as I got older, and again, this is why I say that my childhood is indicative of larger American trends, because when Obama became the president, I'm now in like the high school time frame. I can remember things a little bit better. The rhetoric just became, it heightened, it accelerated. The Democrats are evil. They are coming for our guns. This, like, the Christian apocalypse, the rapture is coming. We got a lot more guns. Like, we might have always had some, but in the Obama years, like, we now have gun lockers. They became borderline preppers, doomsday preppers. So I knew some families who had actual underground bunkers and were like actual preppers. But my family, like my mom, one time I went into the pantry. She has this lovely walk-in pantry, and there was a 5-gallon bucket of corn seed on the floor. And we're not farmers. Like, we don't, like, there's no reason for us to have this. I am immediately upset because I know why it's there. I was like, there's a 5-gallon bucket of corn in your pantry. Like, you should maybe be confused, but I wasn't. And I shouted at my mom. I was like, Mom, are these apocalypse seeds? And she shouted back, like, so what if they are? So I was like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do, woman? You're going to farm corn when Obama comes to take your guns? Like,
So you saw that there was an unreasonableness to how your parents were thinking and how the religious community around you was thinking.
Yes. At this point, and this is again like high school, college timeframe, I definitely see it as unreasonable. But I didn't connect it to anything deeper. I didn't think that it was really like a big problem. I thought it was just like, oh, they're boomers, they're old people, like they're just they don't really know what's going on, or it just doesn't matter. They're the fringe. Not everybody believes this. And probably the worst one was I had graduated. So this was the weekend that Obama was transferring power to Trump. Trump was taking the White House for his first term. And my parents were visiting. I had graduated college by this point. I was now living in South Carolina and working here. And I work for the Navy. And in my apartment complex, I shared a landing with an officer student who was in the same program that I was in. And, he's like maybe 22 years old. Okay. He is not a high-powered person. And my parents come to visit, and we're in the stairwell, and this kid is in the stairwell with us, and they're chatting to him like old people do. They love to do that. And I was just like happy for the reprieve. So I was just like, they're your problem now, guy. Until my mom, out of nowhere, I had never heard her say anything like quite this insane before, asks this like 22-year-old, is it true that when, not if, Obama refuses to relinquish power to Trump and he declares himself to be the Muslim king of the United States, is it true that the true seat of power for true America shifts to the chief nuclear admiral, and he's the guy who decides when we nuke the White House?
Oh, what?
I was like, and I'm like having an out of body experience at this point. I was like, I'm going to lose my security clearance. Like, this is some batshit stuff here. And it was hilarious because this officer student was like from Texas. And so he had like this thick country accent, and he was so polite and gracious. And he was just like, well, ma'am, I don't rightly know. Like, it's just like, I wouldn't know that. And I like, I shuffle my parents into my apartment and I was just like, what are you doing? Like, you cannot say those things to people. And my dad had not said anything this entire time, but they both turn on me and they're just like, you don't tell us like who we can and cannot talk to. Like, you don't know what's going on. Like, I saw a YouTube video, like you're being disrespectful. Watch your tone. And
Wow.
yeah, so,
Wow.
that I was like, oh, that's a conspiracy theory. Like that's bonkers. You've lost it. I'm looking up like dementia homes for you. Like,
Yeah. And so did you tell them that? Were you like, well, that's actually conspiracy theory? Did they even know about conspiracy theories, or would they plug their ears and nah, 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 nah,
Oh, they were not listening to me after that. It was watch your tone. Like we do, we know what we're talking about. And at the time, again, like I didn't know a lot about conspiracy theories. I knew that it was wrong, but I didn't have like, any counter facts to that statement. And again, like this was 2017, this is before COVID and everything. And I was still just like, this is just my family problem. This is just my like, aging lunatic parents who are computer illiterate. They found YouTube. They don't really know how to decipher, jokes from reality. Just it's not a big deal. Move on. And then 2020, and then the end of the world, because the pandemic started, and I'm living in South Carolina. All my family's still in Florida. So we are several states separated. And it wasn't until July of 2020 when Kathy came to visit. And when she was visiting, she gets out of the car. The first thing she says is, do I need a face mask? And I was like, yes. Normally when people come to visit, we go out to a bunch of restaurants. We do all the sightseeing, the tours, like whatever. And obviously, she had been planning to come stay with us for like over 6 months. And it was just because she was driving to North Carolina to see family. And so she needed a free place to stay. And so I told her before she came, because it was in the summer spike of COVID, I was like, I am an essential worker, so I am still potentially exposed to people. You are welcome to come stay with us, but please understand that there's an element of risk. And if you don't want to do that, I totally understand. And she's like, no, it's fine. I'm going to come stay. I was like, we're not going to be able to go to restaurants. We're not going to be able to do the normal tourist thing, but like, I'll get some groceries. We'll cook dinner in the apartment and we'll have like a nice night. She was there for like 2 nights. And so she shows up and she's like, do I need a face mask? And I was like, well, if we go literally anywhere, yes. And she's like, oh, haha. In Florida, we don't wear face masks. And this is the first time I've ever worn a face mask. And I was just like, what is happening? And again, like I work on a military base, so like there were required restrictions and things. And so then she spends the rest of the 2 days making fun of us for taking COVID seriously, just, not really caring at all that there's a global pandemic. And when she was in Taiwan, teaching English, there was another girl there that she became really, really close with, who I had met once. And I followed her on social media. And while Kathy was visiting, this friend of hers was just going down the rabbit hole. And at the time, I didn't know what the rabbit hole was, but her friend was posting about 5G radiation and patriots and Trump. And she was like obsessed with child sex trafficking, but I didn't understand what that had to do with anything else that she was talking about. Was just saying that face masks were child abuse, that face masks were slavery. This was all before the vaccines were available. And, Kathy like talked to me about it and she was just like, oh, like you don't believe in any conspiracy theories? And I was just like, I don't know how to answer that question. Like, does Bigfoot exist? Maybe. Like what? I'm pretty sure that, anyway, so she leaves. It was not a good weekend. She sends me a voice message the next day that basically like ruined my life. She said that like her other friend from our hometown who goes to this more charismatic church that she's a part of, believes that when the COVID vaccine comes out, it's going to be full of secret metal. And the metal in your blood is going to interact with 5G radiation to control your mind, to make you vote Democrat or kill you. She wasn't sure which one. And I thought she was just like, her friend found this kooky thing on the internet and like, oh, isn't this so funny? Like, I was like, oh my God, that's hilarious. Like, you know, what dark corner of 4chan did she pull that off of? And Kathy was like, no. Like, she believes this. She believes this. And I was shocked. Again, it's really difficult to talk about this stuff in hindsight because now we know what it means. Now we know what QAnon was. We know like the heights of conspiracy theory panic that the vaccines push people into. But at the time, this was the first thing that I had heard. And I was like, you need to question all of your life choices for tolerating the existence of this person, let alone, calling them your friend, like your best friend. And if anybody that you know other than me says the word radiation to you, you need to just slap them and walk away because, what the heck? And her only response to that was like, oh, I think that's a little bit harsh. And I was like, you don't get to tell me the 5G radiation is going to control my mind and expect me not to react with violence. Like, what is happening? And, we didn't talk a little bit after that, but I was like, something is wrong. Kathy is not a boomer. Kathy is not my mom who's like YouTube illiterate. Like, Kathy is my age, my best friend. Like, something is wrong that she is like entertaining these things. And I started paying attention and I started seeing what she was posting and seeing what her friend from Taiwan was posting, and that she started posting things that her friend from Taiwan was posting. And then all of a sudden it hit me in like a wave. My mom started sending me videos. My other friends from my hometown started sending me videos. Their moms started sending me videos, of preachers standing at pulpits talking about how George Soros is like funding an evil satanic cabal that is like funding a mark of the beast vaccine, and just the most insane things that I had ever heard. And it was everyone. And I'm not there. I'm states away. There's a pandemic going on. I can't like really sit down and talk to any of these people. I'm trying to engage with them like in messages, but also I don't know what's going on. I don't know why all of this is happening. And that was all in July and August. And again, highly paralleled to just larger cultural shifts, because the summer of 2020 is the summer that a lot of the QAnon stuff went mainstream. QAnon actually started in October of 2017, which was extremely early into the Trump presidency. And it started on 4chan, which is, if you know what Reddit is, it's one of these like message board forums. Reddit is kind of like the friendly forum. 4chan is kind of its like nefarious cousin, where there's like less moderation. You can get away with posting like a lot skeevier stuff. Within a month, it moved from 4chan to 8chan, which is just like the evil step twin to 4chan, where there's no moderation. This was where all of the like pedophiles and like neo-Nazis on the internet used to hang out. And QAnon moved to this website. And that was in, again, 2017. It wasn't until, in the 2018, 2019 timeframe, a couple like influencers, they had like YouTube channels and stuff, purposefully tried to move the QAnon conspiracy theory off of these dark forums onto mainstream platforms like YouTube. There is a Chan culture to these websites where they're almost kind of like inside jokes, and they're trolls, where it was a common thing for somebody to post under the name of like FBI Anon or CIA Anon or State Trooper Anon, and pretend to be an insider in one of these organizations and drop hints and things, pretending to like be releasing top secret information. And like a couple people would post about it and it would go back and forth for a little bit, and then like the joke would be up and people would move on until QAnon happened. Q is actually a DOE security clearance level. So it's like their version of top secret for the Department of Energy. So it's not even like all that exciting. And so Q Clearance Patriot, or QAnon, did the same thing that all these other trolls had done, but for whatever godforsaken reason, this one just blew up. A couple of these influencers moved it onto YouTube and Reddit. It got Reddit panels that had over 70,000 people on them. And then in the summer of 2019, 8chan was directly connected with at least 3 racially motivated mass shootings. The Christchurch shooting that happened in New Zealand, where like over 50 people died at a mosque, a Walmart in El Paso shooting that was targeting Hispanic people, where I want to say like over 20 people lost their lives, and then also a synagogue shooting in California where I think maybe 1 person was killed. They all posted these like racist manifestos to 8chan. On these neo-Nazi, racist, white supremacist boards. And, people were commenting on the manifestos and commenting on like videos of the shootings and stuff, saying like cheering them on. And so 8chan got removed from the internet. There were Senate hearings about this. They got removed from the internet. And QAnon was like kind of adrift for a little bit. The people who were kind of running this were like desperately trying to get it back online in some fashion. And they did eventually put it back online in the form of 8kun. But what happened in the summer of 2020 was that they finally succeeded in getting this to go super mainstream, where something called pastel QAnon happened. And sorry, I'm kind of all over the place, but QAnon, just most people probably know this. The base idea of it is that there is a satanic cabal of elites who are pulling the strings of global governments and economies to drive the world towards like one world order and like an oligarchy kind of situation. And the conspiracy theory specifically for QAnon is, and that conspiracy theory has been regurgitated throughout history for hundreds of years. But the QAnon specific aspect of this was that there are underground rings of child sex trafficking like all over the globe with hundreds of thousands of children. And and like every single person who believes in QAnon that you talk to is going to have some small different spin to it. So it's really hard to like perfectly pin down, but some versions of the conspiracy theory say that they are literally breeding children in underground tunnels under every major city. And the satanic cabal of elites are not doing this just for like money. And I'm sorry, I should have maybe put like a trigger warning on this whole conversation, but they're doing it as part of satanic ritual sacrifice, and they are sacrificing these children sometimes to the demon Moloch at the height of their fear and terror in order to extract adrenochrome from their blood, which is oxidized adrenaline, which is a real substance, but like has no like actual use. But the conspiracy theory is that adrenochrome is either some like wicked high or that it's like a youth serum. And if anybody has seen Hillary Clinton, they know that that's not true. So
sorry, Hillary.
Yeah. So, this is where all of that like child sex trafficking stuff that Kathy's friend had been posting was coming from. And and the conspiracy theory is that Trump is the only like rich, famous elite who is actually fighting the cabal, and my favorite conspiracy theory part of this is that Trump is actually like a time traveler. To go down just like a very small rabbit hole, because this is my favorite. There was like a very small facet of the QAnon world that believed that when Nikola Tesla died, John Trump, who is Donald Trump's uncle, and this is actually true, was asked by the FBI or somebody to go through Nikola Tesla's effects to see if there was anything of scientific value that the government might want. And to my understanding, that did actually happen. But the conspiracy theory is that John Trump found either a time machine or the schematics for a time machine, which he stole for himself and then passed down to Donald Trump. And so Donald Trump has a time machine and he is traveling through space and time to fight the cabal.
Sounds like a movie.
Yeah. Yes. So in the summer of 2020, what happened was on TikTok, the Wayfair shipping conspiracy theory got a lot of traction. A lot of people believed it. And this was that Wayfair was shipping children in cabinets. And so there were cabinets that were for sale on Wayfair for like $40,000. And the cabinet was named the Ashley cabinet. And if you bought this, you would buy it, the cabinet would show up with a little girl named Ashley inside of it. And for whatever godforsaken reason, this like blew up on TikTok and it soft pilled people, which if you try to get somebody to believe in these conspiracy theories, you start by soft pilling them by saying that like, oh, there's a lot of government corruption, or, the elites, there's a lot of like power imbalance and wealth imbalance. And like, that's a problem. Or like there, with Maha, there are issues with like health and medicine and healthcare. So they take these like real issues, sex trafficking, child sex trafficking, labor trafficking, all of that is a real problem. They take the kernel of truth fallacy, and then they soft pill people with it. And this is the same way that like cults will recruit people, because people who are recruited into cults and people who fall for conspiracy theories typically they're in turmoil, they're in a transition point in their life. They moved cities, they just graduated college, they just started college, they just went through a divorce, they just went through bankruptcy, like whatever it is. It could be good or bad. They're in a position of transition. And then, and they're looking for something, it could be that I'm looking for a solution to my bankruptcy, or personal relationship issues, or I just really care about the environment. And so they provide an oversimplified answer to whatever the thing that you care about is. And so in the summer of 2020, we also had the Black Lives Matter movement kind of in full swing. And so you had all of these Christian and Mormon white women, mommy bloggers, who wanted to feel the moral superiority of being a social crusader, but they couldn't get behind Black Lives Matter because they're racist. And so what's more important than racial equality? Child sex trafficking. And so they latched on to these conspiracy theories about child sex trafficking. And there were already these QAnon influencers in the space, like putting out misinformation regarding child sex trafficking. And so, these white women who had really well-established social media accounts with thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of followers, took this misinformation, slapped some glitter on it, and then it blew up like wildfire. And you can track the statistics on this. Between July and August of the summer of 2020, the number of QAnon-related Facebook groups and posts and things exploded by like thousands of %. And so that's exactly the same time that it hit me. It went really mainstream, and that's when I started to see it. And that's when like the evangelicals really started picking up on it. And the other thing was, and I think why QAnon took off the way that it did, maybe better than a lot of the other ones did, is that if you go back and you read the Q drops, there are Bible verses in there. There's religious language. It's talking about God. It's talking about Jesus. There's literally Bible verses. And it's talking about basically end times rhetoric. It perfectly aligns with the Tim LaHaye rapture narrative. And so it was very easy for the white evangelicals to just like pick this up and run with it.
Well, and also let's not forget too that anyone who has been indoctrinated to believe the Bible is a literal document meant to be taken literal, that everything in there really happened rather than it's metaphor, this sort of thing. They are already having to suppress their doubts and their critical thinking. They have to put all those on hold. And also they're told that the devil is against them, the world will be against them. So really primed to see persecution everywhere that it is not, which is not to say there aren't people being persecuted around the world. There certainly are, but Christians are in no way being persecuted in the United States of America. That's just a total fallacy. But when people have been primed to see these things and believe these things, that's exactly what happens. So they were so ripe for that. Just a perfect confluence of events to whip this whole thing up. And I'm guessing then that this leads into the Pizzagate tragedy.
Yeah, so Pizzagate actually predates QAnon. And so Pizzagate happened in 2016 when the Hillary Clinton emails were leaked right before that election. And so a lot of the elements of the Pizzagate conspiracy theory were plagiarized into QAnon. And like, there's just like, I could talk about this for days. There's so many negative aspects to this, but a lot of it is still like kind of fringe. But it has real impact. So like stochastic terrorism, you put out enough misinformation and fear mongering and just like bigotry out into the world, and eventually enough people are going to become so radicalized that it manifests in actual violence. And we saw that with Pizzagate. Even though Pizzagate was like a very short episode in the history of things, and again, for those who don't know, the Pizzagate conspiracy theory was that Hillary Clinton ate babies. And it was that when her emails were leaked in the election for 2016, the conspiracy theory was that there were codes hidden in her email. And anytime they were talking about food, it was code for like child sex abuse acts. And specifically, pizza was supposed to be code for this. And they would get pizza from this pizza parlor in Washington, D.C. called Comet Ping Pong, which is just like, it's so absurd that all of this revolves around just like some poor pizza place called Comet Ping Pong. And they got flooded with like crazy people from the internet saying that like you're trafficking children in the basement of this pizza parlor. And a man with a gun went into this pizza parlor and like shot it up. Luckily nobody was hurt, thank God. I'm not even sure that they had a basement.
No, I think they didn't have a basement. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so that happened. And then like a year or two later, like this stuff is still hanging around so much. Somebody tried to set it on fire. There was an attempted arson of this pizza parlor. And then it got morphed into QAnon again from 2017 until present, basically. And QAnon did the same exact thing. There is a string of violent crimes that were committed by people who were motivated by QAnon. Shootings, a guy with like an armored vehicle blocking a dam bridge somewhere. There was a lot of conspiracy theories because it was centering around child sex trafficking. A lot of like mentally unwell mothers who had their children taken by child protective services were trying to kidnap their children like out of foster care because they believed that their children were about to be trafficked by the cabal. There were several murders in those kidnapping schemes. So it's just like there's, on top of like the absolute just melting of the minds of white evangelicals and the place that it just put us into politically, it also had like, acute points of like really tragic stochastic terrorism that came out of this. Yes. So anyway, QAnon, I figured it out what it was in August of 2020. My friend, who grew up in the same community that I did, but who actually deconstructed well before I did, she was like, oh, hey, like, I think this is what's going on. She sent me an article about QAnon. And then I went down the rabbit hole because I was like, I need to understand what's happening because it's both of my parents, it's my brother, it's my best friend. And unfortunately, the weekend after Kathy visited in July, my now husband proposed to me. So we were planning our wedding as all of this was unfolding. And again, like during the pandemic, on top of the like conspiracy theory pandemic. And, I asked Kathy to be in my wedding because that was like the weekend after, so it was like it was a weird visit, but it wasn't like, oh, this is like, I didn't know how bad it was going to get. We didn't have like maid of honor and best man, but she was like kind of the unofficial maid of honor. And the wedding planning process was a nightmare. When the vaccines finally came out, like we weren't sure that we were ever going to get to have a wedding. A lot of our friends ended up having like Facebook Live weddings, having to cancel their receptions and things. We happened very coincidentally to time our wedding at the lowest point of Delta right before Omicron took off. And at the time, we thought the vaccines were like 98% effective. And the wedding was outdoors. We were tracking the numbers like religiously leading up to the event. And like, we felt comfortable having the wedding. And 98% of the guests were vaccinated just of their own accord. It was only the people who were from my hometown who were not. And we didn't have any elderly family attending. But my parents and my dad has one lung. He's over 65 years old. He is a cancer survivor. He is the definition of high risk for the pandemic. And I had the conversation with my parents of, I cannot, I can't have the wedding if you guys are not vaccinated. We're not requiring it for everybody else because they're vaccinated anyway, but like you guys have to be vaccinated because I'll never be able to forgive myself if something happens to my dad just so that I can like throw a party. And my mom said, then you should just elope. So she would rather cancel my wedding than get the vaccine. And I was just like, oh, no, that's not how this is going to go down. My dad had to spend 3 days convincing her, cajoling her to get the vaccine. And she eventually did. But they have resented me for it, like ever since, for the last 5 years.
And though nothing bad happened after they got it? Like nothing as a result of that? Yeah.
And they're convinced that there are like side effects and stuff that they have, but like they're also just aging and that's just natural.
Yes.
So.
How exhausting.
Well, and this was on top of, they were stockpiling hydroxychloroquine and refusing to face mask. And my mother was sending me like Judy Mikovits conspiracy theory videos. And, she was the woman who was like in the Plandemic documentary that said that face masks activate the virus. And also that if you ride in an airplane, you'll die of radiation poisoning. So just like a real quacko.
So what would you say then when your mom would be sending you these videos? Like, did you watch them and then go point by point? Or were you like, Mom, I'm not even going to spend my time watching this?
It was a mix. Like I tried to like reply and it was just like talking to a wall. I tried to go point by point and be like, this is not true. This woman is an insane person. Here are some of the other things that she said that are blatantly false. And, I spent many hours and a lot of time like having both like these message conversations. And then every time I would see her in person, having these like very like multiple hours long conversations about this. And every single time I would see her, we would start at ground zero. It was like nothing that I had said ever, like she retained any of it. And I mean, anybody who has had to deal with a family member who has like fallen for anti-vax, voter fraud, QAnon, any of the conspiracy theories recently knows exactly what I'm talking about. It's maddening. It makes you feel like you are insane. And and that's why I did such a deep dive into like, what is QAnon? Where is this coming from? Because I was trying to understand what they believed so that I could talk them out of it and say like, oh, this is where this is coming from. It's from 8chan. It's connected to anti-Semitism. It's connected to mass shootings. Like, it's really, really nasty stuff. And just nobody listened. I went to my bridesmaids during this time, because they're like 3 of them were in my hometown, and I knew, and they're in this evangelical environment. And I was like, I want to forewarn you about this stuff. I don't understand why the white evangelicals are the ones who are falling for this in droves. The statistics change over time, depending on like how close you are to the election, how close you are to January 6th. But like, some statistics, it was like 70% of Republicans agreed with the core ideas of QAnon.
Oh my gosh.
And, so I went to my bridesmaids and I was like, this is what's happening. This is where it's coming from. And Kathy was gone. Hook, line, and sinker, like, could not have a conversation with her. She was like, the COVID vaccine's causing infertility, and I was just like, send me the article, like, show me where it says that. And it just, nothing. You could not talk to her. My other bridesmaids were not like actively sharing this information, but they were hearing it and they were scared. And unfortunately, I was the only voice in their worlds that was saying no.
Wow.
Everybody else that they knew was sharing it, was talking about it, was fear mongering over it. And so they did not get the vaccine because their husbands didn't get the vaccine, because their mothers didn't get the vaccine. And I was the only one. And, one of them had believed the Wayfair shipping conspiracy theory. And when I told her about that, she listened. She trusted me. And so she was like, oh, okay. And like, it gave her some peace to be like, oh, I'm glad that that's not true.
Right.
But it wasn't enough to really like change her mind on the rest of it. And then my other bridesmaid, who is the only person who, like, I feel like really listened to me at any point during this. She was like, oh, I already know all about this, because her aunt, who was a woman that I have known my entire life, who is like the local kingpin to the like Arbonne pyramid scheme in our hometown.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
MLM.
Yeah, there's a huge overlap between like cult psychology and MLMs. She had gone hard pilled, not soft pilled, hard pilled, was talking about adrenochrome, was talking about like her family couldn't get her off of the computer because she was like doing her own research all day. She had told my bridesmaid that all of the hurricanes that hit Florida in 2020, and it's Florida, so we always have hurricanes. This is not new. All of the hurricanes that hit Florida in 2020 were man-made by Jewish space lasers with the intent of sinking the state of Florida because DeSantis had given them too much freedom. And
oh my God.
The 5G radiation mind control thing was like the craziest thing I had ever heard in my life. And now this was the craziest thing that I had ever heard in my life. And I had talked to like 3 people. I had barely scratched the surface. And I had immediately found the most rabid anti-Semitism that I could have ever imagined. And it was horrifying. And it is still horrifying. And these are not fringe people. These are just normal, good Christian people. And they're falling for the most evil thing that you could possibly come up with. And so that was horrifying. We made it through the wedding. I had to uninvite Kathy. I had to uninvite my maid of honor from my wedding, which she was very gracious about. But
was it because of all these beliefs? Were you like, I can't have you here because of all these beliefs?
Yes, 100%.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I like my mother and my brother and some other people, like I went back and forth with her with just many long conversations, and it just never went anywhere. My brother, at one point, I turned to my brother because he was living with my parents, and he's young and he has more influence with them. And I was just like, I need help. Like, we have to do something about this. And he was fully bought in on the conspiracy theories as well. He was
what
like,
a nightmare.
The death numbers are fake. You've been brainwashed by higher education, and that we should just let the weak die. is what he said. Those are the words that he said. He has to this day refused to apologize for. And I was like, our Father has one lung. Our Father, who you are living with in a global pandemic, he is the weak. We have older relatives. We have a great aunt, great uncle. They're like 83 years old or something. I was like, we should let the weak die. What are you talking about? You literal Nazi. And so that was horrifying.
Oh,
and
yeah.
like
I
actually
just can't
insane.
even imagine. Yeah. Well, Cynane, I wonder if we should, so you've brought us up right up to the point where you got married, even there was all this craziness going on, and you did choose to uninvite the person who had been your best friend. And now you realize that your brother has also got into it. And this really propelled you to do a deep dive into all these conspiracy things. And you went so far back, so far, far, far back. And I can't wait to hear the rest of it. I wonder if this is where we should break and invite folks to join us for part 2, because it really is incredible. Do you feel comfortable ending things for today?
Yeah, that is great. And to anybody who has heard my story before, what I want to talk about in a continued episode is something that I have not talked about before, and it is a history to conspiracy theories and white Christian nationalism that will be something that has not been talked about before, at least by me, and it's a key element to the book that I am closing in on.
Yes, I know when you first approached me about coming on the podcast and sharing some of the things that you have discovered, I truly was blown away. And we're going to get into that the next time. So thank you very much for joining us today. How can people find out more about you and your story? Do you have a website that's available?
Yes, thank you for the plug. I am active mostly on Instagram and Threads, but I have a website, takingoffthetinfoilhat.com, that I really like to share because of the resource page. It has more information about like my project, but it has almost all, I need to update it, of the books that I read in my deconstruction, and they're categorized by topic. If you have a question about like white Christian nationalism or hell theology or any of this, like the stuff that I desperately needed in my deconstruction. And I know that like Recovering from Religion and some other organizations have similar resource lists. So this is just to augment that. So I definitely encourage anybody to check that out.
All right, takingoffthetinfoilhat.com. Thank you for that. I'm excited to go on there also and take a look at the different resources that were helpful for you. And I want to thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation as much as I have. It's just been so gripping. And stay tuned, because soon we will have the next episode available. Thanks, everyone. Take care.